Welcome to the Vibrantly You podcast. We're your hosts, Megan Martineau.
Caitlin Cipriano. In this podcast, we talk about fitness and nutrition on your motherhood journey. Whether you're trying to conceive, pregnant, postpartum, or beyond, you're welcome here.
Nothing is off limits, and our goal is to support you in this important season of life so that you can feel vibrantly you. As a reminder, this information is not medical advice. Please see the show notes for more details. Welcome back to the Vibrantly You podcast. This is Meg, and I am back for another solo episode, and we are going to be talking about whether or not you can actually build strength in pregnancy, or if it's better to just wait until postpartum. Now, I want to talk about this topic because in the last several years, I have seen on social media people talking about, do I work out in pregnancy, or is it just better for me to wait until after the baby's here, or even people that are having kids in succession. So like people that are having two under two, or, like people having babies back to back, they're like, well, I don't know that it's worth it for me to put all this time and energy into a workout routine. Maybe I should just wait until I'm totally done having babies. And I feel like this especially is something that people say when it comes to pelvic floor health and focusing on the pelvic floor. And this is something that honestly drives me crazy. I feel like this is a big myth to put off exercise and putting off prioritizing your body and strengthening your body until you're done having babies, because as we will talk about in this episode, there are so many changes that are happening to your body in pregnancy and immediately postpartum that it needs strengthening. And the longer you put this off, the harder it's going to be for you to kind of feel like your body is functioning properly again, or to feel even like somewhat like yourself. So this is a good episode to listen to. So quickly, before we dive into this episode, I want to remind you that I'm hosting a free Strong in Pregnancy class today, Wednesday, April 2nd at 12 p.m. Eastern time. So if you're listening to this episode this morning, you can still sign up or get the link to the replay. I will leave the link in the show notes. And this class is a mix of education and a workout. So we're going to start out with a little bit of education, just teaching you more about exercising in pregnancy. And then we're going to jump into a workout together. This workout is designed for all trimesters, for all fitness levels, really just to help you feel your best in pregnancy. So I hope you join us for that today. But let's jump back into today's topic. So again, the question is, can you build strength during pregnancy, and is it worth it? So the answer is yes and yes. First thing that we need to address is a large myth that pregnancy exercise is just about reducing excessive weight gain or doing yoga and stretching, that you shouldn't be doing any heavy lifting or anything strenuous. Now, if you are someone who's been listening to this podcast for a while, you know that none of that is true. But pregnancy is an incredible opportunity to build functional strength that is going to serve you not only during your pregnancy, but also for your birth, postpartum, and beyond. Now, this doesn't mean that when you're working out in pregnancy, you're going to necessarily be hitting new PRs on heavy lifts, but strength is not just about how much weight you can move. It really is about how functionally strong your body is for the demands being placed on it. And during pregnancy and postpartum, there are a lot of demands being placed on the body. So let's go through some of the changes that are happening in your pregnant body. Obviously, the first one is that you are growing a human being. You are growing a brand new organ, the placenta. You're growing both of these from scratch. So that requires a lot of energy and resources to do that. Your blood volume is doubled, so your heart is working harder. Your lungs are working harder. All of your organs are like squished and pushed around. So that just creates, discomfort in general. And your ligaments and your tissues are also adapting to support the growing baby. And muscles are stretching too, like your abdominal muscles. So your body is doing a lot. It's doing a lot of really incredible things. That is definitely something to celebrate. However, without intentional strength training, with all of these changes happening, many women start to experience discomfort, pain, disconnect from the body. We talk a lot on this podcast about different pains that come up. Last week, I just did an episode on low back pain. We've also talked about SI joint pain. That's pain in the back of the pelvis. You can have SPD in the front of the pelvis, round ligament pain. There's all sorts of things that come up. And this is where strategic strength training comes in. So when I work with prenatal clients, we are focusing on building strength in these key areas. Number one is going to be your posterior chain. So this is building a strong back, glutes, hamstrings. All of this is going to help counterbalance the weight of your growing belly, pulling you forward. Your center of gravity has shifted. It can also help to reduce back pain and some of that pelvic pain that I mentioned. Number two is your deep core. So you hear about this a lot on social media. We are talking about the transverse abdominis as well as the pelvic floor. So learning how to properly engage both the TVA and the pelvic floor when you're pregnant is going to help with overall stability. It's going to help with that pelvic pain, low back pain, and it just also helps prepare you for labor and delivery. And it helps with that early postpartum recovery, being able to reconnect to your core and pelvic floor. Number three is upper body. So sometimes I feel like people neglect upper body when it comes to pregnancy, but we really want a strong upper body because we want to focus on strengthening the shoulders, chest, arms, back, preparing you for all of the lifting, carrying, and holding that you will be doing once a baby arrives. Now, I feel like people underestimate how physically demanding postpartum is, and specifically those first few months postpartum when you are in a more deconditioned, weakened state. Your body goes through so much with labor and birth, just exerting so much energy that you are kind of like depleted really early on. But there is no rest for moms. Like right away, you're having to pick up the baby from the bassinet, carry them, carry the car seat. All of this requires strength. And we want to be thinking about this and preparing for it in pregnancy. You don't want to wait until you're already postpartum. And I want to share just a quick little personal story here because I know from personal experience how much intentional strength training in pregnancy can completely change the game for you, and not only how comfortable you are throughout your pregnancy, but also into that postpartum recovery like I was talking about. So for my first pregnancy, I wanted to be active. I had a lot of like hopes and dreams, if you will, but things just didn't pan out. It was 2020, like peak COVID, like the world was just chaos. So I tried to continue on with my regular pre-pregnancy workouts, and I quickly learned that that was not the best route. It wasn't comfortable. Once I hit like 30 weeks, I want to say, or 32 weeks, I finished up a workout, and all of a sudden I had horrible pelvic pain. Like it felt like I broke my pelvis. Couldn't walk, couldn't do anything. Went to the doctor. They told me it was normal. Whatever. I didn't know any better. So I was like, okay. And I pretty much rested the rest of my pregnancy. Ended up having a C-section. If you want to learn more about that pregnancy and my birth, I do share my birth story in episode 9. So you can go and listen to that. I'll link that below in the show notes. But then I just had a really hard postpartum recovery because I hadn't prepared my body during pregnancy. On the flip side, with my second pregnancy, I was really intentional from the get-go. I was very sick in my first trimester and beyond, so I really didn't start working out until I was 16 weeks pregnant. But by 18 weeks, I started to develop that same pelvic pain, the SPD in the front. And I was like, oh no, we are not doing this again. So I was incredibly intentional. Like all of this stuff that I talk about on the podcast, all of the ways to exercise in pregnancy, I implemented every single piece. I was so strategic in the way that I exercised, and I had such a better experience. Despite having that pelvic pain, it was drastically reduced. I was able to continue to work out, go about my daily activities, chase after my 2-year-old, lift him, do all the things. I did end up having a vaginal birth, and I will be doing a birth story on that in the future. So I can always go back and link it in the show notes later on. But my postpartum recovery was just so different as well. Like from the get-go, I just had more control over my deep core muscles, my pelvic floor, and I was able to get back to exercise much quicker and build strength much quicker. And I completely attribute that to the work that I did in pregnancy. Now, that being said, strength training during pregnancy is not the same as your pre-pregnancy routine, like I learned in that first pregnancy. And here's what makes it different. So you want to be focusing on functional movement patterns. So things that you're going to be doing in your daily life. So thinking squats, hinges, lifts, carries, things that are going to directly translate to pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. We also do some modification with exercises as your body is changing and your pregnancy progresses. And now modification doesn't mean making the exercises easier. It just means we might need to make adjustments depending on pregnancy symptoms and circumstances. We do emphasize proper breathing technique and coordination with movement. Breathing technique is not often something that people focus on when they're exercising in general. And then we do really prioritize form and alignment. We look at that more than you might pre-pregnancy. I mean, obviously form is really important, but again, like with pregnancy, with all those postural changes, your center of gravity shifting, we really want to hone in on that form just to make sure that you're still exercising in a way where you're not going to injure yourself. And then we do adjust intensity based on your energy levels and symptoms, which can fluctuate daily and weekly. So let's go through a couple of questions people often have, again, when it comes to building strength in pregnancy. So the first one is it safe to lift weights during pregnancy? Absolutely. Yes, it is. Again, we want to have proper form and modifications as needed. This is why working with someone who understands prenatal exercise is really important, and also having a more individualized approach versus a general program, because everyone has a different pregnancy. So I highly recommend you tune into episode 15 more, where I really dive into how safe it is to lift weights during pregnancy. But the answer is yes, as long as you've been cleared to work out. Another common question is, what if I have not strength trained before? What if this would be new to me during pregnancy? Yes, you can still start now as long as you have been cleared to exercise by a doctor. You would just want to approach it like a beginner. You would want to start with body weight and then gradually build from there, really working on body awareness, proper form, breathing technique. And even if you're someone who has strength trained before, but it's been a while, you would take the same approach. Third question is, will strength training hurt my baby? No. Go to episode 11 where I deep dive into pregnancy safe exercises. And then another really common question is, what if I'm experiencing pain in my pregnancy? Shouldn't I be resting? Should I really be working out? Is that going to make it worse? And this is actually where strategic strength training can really make a difference for you in your pregnancy. So many of the pregnancy discomforts that I mentioned before, like the pelvic and low back pain, do stem from some muscular imbalances, some instability in the pelvis, and strength training can make a world of difference. It can't always necessarily eliminate the pain, but it can significantly reduce it so that you can still move well and enjoy your pregnancy. So, overarching question of this episode, can you get stronger during pregnancy? My answer is a resounding yes, but it's all about the right kind of strength for this season of life. So again, you're not trying to necessarily hit PRs or, get a six pack, obviously, but we want to strength train to have a more comfortable pregnancy, prepare for birth, and set the foundation for postpartum. If you take away one thing from this episode, I want you to remember that your pregnant body is incredible and it is resilient. It is strong. It is powerful. And by approaching strength training with intention and knowledge, you can build functional strength that does help reduce pain, prepares your body for birth, and sets you up for a stronger postpartum recovery. Now, remember, every pregnancy is different, and what works for one person may not work for someone else. This is why having a personalized program, some one-on-one guidance can be very, very valuable. So that wraps up today's solo episode. I will be back next week with Caitlin. We'll be back at this together, and we will be talking about cycle syncing and nutrition. So we're going to be switching gears a little bit and talking to those who are trying to conceive. So hopefully I see you later on today in my free Strong in Pregnancy class. Again, that will be linked below in the show notes. And otherwise, I will chat with you next week.